Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome back to another episode here on African Confessions. The following story that you're going to be listening to, it comes from a translation of a message that I received. The message that I have for you reads like this. Hello, my brother, how are you? Can you please post my own story as hidden identity? So it was in the year 2014, after I had raised some money, me and my brother. We then bought this other thing there in South Africa. We thought that maybe the thing that we had bought, it was a gold sensor. But those guys, they had lied to us. Later on, we then found out that this was not a gold sensor, but it was one of those sensors that they use if you are getting into a casino. And we had purchased this thing for 15,000 rands. And me and my brother, we didn't have a lot of money because we were just working as gardeners. We were working for this white man who had a garden service company. So you can imagine raising that type of money. And we came back home with great hope, thinking that this gold sensor that we had bought was actually going to give us great wealth. But unfortunately, when we went to the mines, they laughed at us and they told us that this thing, it will sense anything that is metallic. Well, we tried to illegally dig up for gold, but we then saw that this was not in our blood. We then returned back to South Africa. We only went there and we worked for 3 months. And after working so hard, we returned back home. I then got my driver's license. I started working at that funeral parlor as the driver. This was during the COVID days. That was when I got a job, because there was a lot of people that were leaving their jobs thinking that the world was coming to an end. So my story is like this. Ever since I have started working at this funeral parlor, I have been traveling alone with corpses, especially when I started working. They used to give me a lot of medication so that I won't be afraid, because I was afraid, my brother. This was like the first time ever traveling alone in a car where you know that at the back you are carrying someone who is dead. Well, because I have a big family, because me and my siblings, we all stay in the same compound, so we just cook at the same place. This is what our parents taught us before they had passed away. So right now we just share the same kitchen. So anything that I get, when we buy stuff, I just buy for everyone. Even my brothers who are still in South Africa, when they send some money, they do not say that this money specifically, it is for such and such a person. They just send to the family. So knowing my responsibilities, even though when I would feel tired and really scared when I would be driving all alone on the highway, I would then remember the poverty that is back home in our village. Then one day there was this other time when I had carried a corpse. I was taking this corpse, going with it to another mortuary. There was a lot of things that was happening in this family. People were actually fighting for this corpse. There was a brother who was staying in Harare. This brother wanted the deceased mother to be buried in Harare. Then there was another one who was in Bulawayo. So these people, they were fighting with each other. Finally, the other brother who was in Bulawayo, he was the one who won this war of words that they were having. So I was then directed by my boss that I had to carry this corpse and travel with it to Bulawayo. When I was on my way, my brother, I just started to feel that the hair at the back of my neck, it was like standing up. I felt like my whole body, there was another energy that was entering into my body. I felt so scared. Then there was a tire puncture. This sound, I had never heard it before. As someone who had driven taxis before, I had had that experience whereby whilst I'll be driving, I can actually have a tire puncture. But this sound, it was as if there was a big collision. I then quickly controlled the vehicle and came with it to a complete stop. When I came to the complete stop, I then got out of the car because actually there was smoke that was coming from the front engine. I looked around, and to my surprise, my brother, there was actually no puncture at all. The smoke quickly cleared. Then I tried to call my boss. That area where I was, I then saw that there was no network at all. I stood there, my brother, at a distance because I was even afraid to approach this vehicle anymore because the sound that I had heard, and I was traveling all alone. I didn't even come across any car because it was that long stretch whilst you were traveling from Harare to Bulawayo in an area whereby you do not meet up with a lot of cars. My brother, I looked at all the four wheels and I saw that all the tires were still good. Well, I then gathered my courage and I entered into the vehicle again. Then I started driving. Just when I lifted my foot from the clutch pedal, something told me to look at the rear view mirror, and I saw, my brother, that there was a man who was standing. This man was just standing in the middle of the road. It was as if he was waiting for me to see him. Then this man just disappeared. Well, I could not dump the car, so I kept on driving. I had this coarse salt that I used to carry around. I took some of that coarse salt and I started rubbing that coarse salt into my hair because this is what I had been told by some drivers who drive for this funeral parlors, that at least if you have coarse salt, then the spirit of the dead is not going to trouble you a lot. I kept on driving until I had arrived at that mortuary that was in Bulawayo. When I arrived there, we offloaded the body of the deceased. I rested for about 2 hours. Then I had to return back to Harare. Upon my return, then I met up with that furious brother, the one who was staying in Harare. This man, he blamed me as if everything that had happened was under my control. He said, "Why did you carry my mother's body to Bulawayo?" So I said, "Why don't you speak with my boss? Because I am not my own boss. This is not my premises. I do not have any control whatsoever." The man, as he entered into his nice, beautiful car, he said that you are going to see what is going to happen to you. And he swore at me and he said that I'll die a poor man. Well, I insulted him back. And I said, if you are a ritualist, if you wanted to use your mother's deceased body, then you are not going to be able to use her body. Because at that time, I think she was already buried. This man then said, well, that is fine. If you have seen that I wanted to use my mother's body, then you are going to give me a body that I am going to use for my rituals. I know what I did, my brother, is criminal. That is why I am even afraid to tell this confession to people who know me. When this man said that, since I had told him that I knew that he was going to use his mother's deceased body for his rituals, therefore I had to provide a dead body for him to do those rituals, I thought it was a joke. I got so sick, my brother, that my wife, she would just stare at me and she would cry. One thing that I want to tell people is that when your relative is sick, you might think that now that they are unable to talk, to respond, they do not hear anything. But I was able to hear everything. My wife, when she would look at me, sometimes she will be speaking with her little sister on WhatsApp, and she'll be like, things are not okay this side. At that time, my wife was already planning for the future, because I recall this other time when she was speaking with her little sister, and she said, you can try to look for a job for me just in case if your brother-in-law does not make it. Right now, I am looking at my children and I am asking myself, what is going to happen to me if he dies? Those were the words that I heard my wife telling me. That same night, I started crying. I was crying, but tears were not flowing out of my eyes. I was just crying in the spirit. Then that man walked into that 2-roomed shack that we were staying at, me and my wife. This man, he then walked to the bed where I was sleeping on. He then said that, "I have your healing." I cried at him and I said, "If you have my healing, why are you letting me suffer like this?" The man then said, "I was supposed to perform some rituals before the burial of my mother, because apparently he used his mother in his business. So he was supposed to do a send-off to his mother. That is why he wanted his mother to be buried in Harare, so that they can do a proper send-off, so that the mother's spirit will never rise up again." Well, this man, he then said that, "You carried my mother's deceased body, and when I tried to communicate with you along the way, you refused to return back to Harare." I said, "But you never communicated with me." This man then said, "Didn't you see a man who was standing in the middle of the road?" I then said, "Yes, I saw. I thought it was just a spirit." He then said, "It was I who was trying to tell you that you have to return back to Harare, but you chose to drive off. You chose to drive off to Bulawayo. And when I tried to tell you about this, you insulted me and you said that I won't be able to do any rituals with my mom's deceased body because it was now out of my reach. And I told you that you are going to provide a body for me. And if you do not provide a body for me, by tomorrow morning, you will be 6 feet under the ground." My brother, when this man told me that the night that he appeared to me, it was going to be my last day on earth, I felt so terrified. The first thought that came to my mind was, what is going to happen to my children? Will my wife ever be married again? What is going to become of my kids? I then accepted that man's offer and I said, "What do you want from me?" This man said that, "You are going to make a plan because I need a corpse. I need a deceased body in my house for 24 hours. And after 24 hours, you will have the freedom to return it back to the mortuary." It was a tough decision, my brother. I then returned back to work. When I returned back to work, I was really nervous. I then went into the mortuary and I stole one deceased body and I loaded it. Knowing everything at our funeral parlor, they just thought that maybe usually what we do is that sometimes we have these other coffins whereby you take one coffin from one mortuary, then you go with it so that it can be repaired, because some of them coffins, they actually stay at our show house for a very long time. So I selected this other coffin that needed to be repaired because it had stayed in the showroom for a very long time. So I was supposed to go to our carpenter to have a look at it. I then took that opportunity when one of my female co-worker was on her lunch break, and knowing her very well, she was fast asleep. And when I was exiting the mortuary, I didn't use the front door. I then went through the back where I loaded that corpse into the coffin and I drove off. And I went to that man's house. This man told me that I had to carry this corpse to his bedroom, and I placed it on his bed. For 24 hours, he did whatever that he did with this corpse, and he said, "Now you can return it." And he told me that I had to return it on that same night. And I said, "I cannot return with this body today because the person who works at night, they were going to ask a lot of questions." He then gave me a charm. This charm that he gave to me, it was just like Vaseline, but it was really smelly. It was smelly, like that smell like sewage. It was 10 times that smell. He said, rub it on your face. I rubbed it on my face. He then helped me to load back that corpse into that coffin. And I then returned back to the mortuary and I placed it back into the mortuary. I felt my heart breaking on the day when the relatives of the deceased came to pick it up, because they do not know what I did. This is my own confession, my brother. This man, he never gave me any money. He never gave me anything. He said that I owed him a dead body, so I had to provide one for him for 24 hours.